LeBron James, Justin Bieber, Issa
Yeah.
Ray, like 50 Cent. There's just so many different interviews or just conversations that you had. Like, talk about that particular time, but also how does one get the same situation? How does one, some of the steps to get big name interviews? Because you were just, granted, you were in the space, but there had to be something you had to do to get into the space, get into the room, get into that environment. So talk about that time, but also give some tips on how people could get those big name interviews too.
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question, Nicki, too, because like I think a lot of people just see like when you got a big name, they don't know the how. And for me, it was always like I looked at it first. Well, first let's just talk about the platform, right? So I knew that I wanted to talk to artists, right? Because I was like taking journalism classes when I was at Howard. But I was like, well, where can this go, right? First and foremost, people they'll do an interview with you if they knew that the platform that where it was going was going to be like big. You know what I mean? So I said, I got to get one of these hip hop websites that's big at the time to let me do interviews, right? So like, and the way that I positioned it, I said, here's my proposition. If you allow me to just put all the interviews on your website, you don't have to pay me. I'll just do whatever interviews that I could get. So I tell the artist, hey, it's going to go on hiphopgame.com, which was at the time one of the biggest hip hop websites.
Yeah.
It was guaranteed to go on there. I said, don't pay me. Just let me say that the interviews are going to go on this website and I'll do all the rest of the work. So it was like twofold. It was like I had the platform because now the platform wants this kid, they don't have to pay, and he'll do all these interviews for free and give them content. And then I had the artist. The artist said, well, this is how I can get on hiphopgame.com. I always want to have my music on there or my press on there, right? And it was like I was killing two birds with one stone. And then for me, I was benefiting because I was getting that experience and I was building up my catalog and my library of, and my interview chops. So that's like how it worked. And then in terms of like how I got the initial talent, it was just really just like everybody that was in my circle, I sort of asked like, hey, do you know this person? Do you know that person? Do you know this person? And I remember the first person that I ever interviewed was a music video director. His name was Jawan Lee, and he had like directed a bunch of music videos. And so I was like, okay, I got this guy. He talked to me about like directing hip hop artists and how becoming a music video director was. And then I would use that interview to then say, hey, I interviewed this person. Can I get an interview? And I would send out mass emails to like a bunch of like publicists, managers. Yeah. I would just try to use one thing to accomplish another thing. And then next thing you know, like shortly after that, I landed like a bigger interview. And these were, mind you, these interviews at the time were actually like on the phone. I didn't start doing video interviews until I went to hiphopgame.com. But then the first website I was working for was called smokingsection.net. And yeah, so it was like phone interviews that led to more phone interviews. And then the phone interviews led to video interviews. And then the smaller video interviews led to the bigger artist video interviews. And then like next thing you know, like I had locked in, I think the biggest one at the time was like probably Nicki Minaj. And then when I interviewed Nicki, it was just a snowball effect after that, because after that, then I interviewed Justin Bieber. And then it was just like, it just kept going and going and going, because now I had, and even at the time, the artists weren't necessarily that big, but they had gotten big shortly after I interviewed them. So I would utilize that and say, hey, I kind of caught Nicki at this like inflection point in her career, I think. And then I tried to have like this sort of like authoritative take on the people. Maybe I can build a niche, and like maybe I can specifically talk to people who are about to blow. And that's kind of became like my strategy when I was in college. And and then it just took off from there. But really it was like consistency. I tried to interview like one person a week. And doing that while you're in college was also pretty difficult, because I was always leaving and going up to New York from DC. But yeah, that's pretty much like how it happened.
Did you have the pressure of, because you said one interview a week, like, was it the pressure of getting big names once a week, or was it like, yo, I know I can't get big names every single week, so let me maybe get their camp, let me get somewhere around the hip hop industry, like,
Yeah,
and that just
no, for
intrigued me.
sure. Yeah, it wasn't about big names once a week at all, actually, because yeah, at that time, I was just independently doing this. It was me and a buddy of mine in college as my cameraman, and I was just like, I was trying, and again, this is like when I started, YouTube wasn't even a thing, so we were putting videos on like Bright Cove, which is like an old digital video player online, and then YouTube sort of like started to hit, but it still wasn't what it is today. So I just I wasn't even really thinking about the consistency from a YouTube standpoint or from
Mm-hmm.
like a SEO standpoint or any of that. What I was doing was I had printed out all my Facebook friends. I had printed them out on like physical paper, like on the list of I had like probably 2,000 friends on Facebook at the time, and I had printed it out. And what I would do is there was a maximum. I think you could send to 25 or 50 people one message at a time. But I had every interview that I did, I would go to the library and I had that list of names printed out, and I would individually send a mass 25 to 50 people in one message. I would send the link to the interview that I just dropped. So what ended up happening was people on campus, I started to become kind of popular on campus, and people were like, Jabari is it like who's he interviewing this week? You know what I mean? Like what type of, and it would be sometimes it would be like these like upcoming rappers like J.R. Ryder from Diplomats, or
Yeah.
it would be Wale, you know what I mean? Or so, like these people, but
Yeah, J. Cole too, I
I
saw.
started, yeah, J. Cole early on. Like this is all while I'm in like school in DC. And I sent all these things out via Facebook, and it took me like 2-3 hours to send one interview out to this whole friend list. But that's the audience that I was trying to cultivate, not necessarily like the broader audience on the internet. Like I was really trying to just like get it to all these Facebook friends, because I was like, I'm sending it to once a week to them, and then people are on campus asking me like, "Oh, who are you interviewing next?" So that's kind of how it started.
So smart.
That's genius.